And how comfy are you to show your socks? If you don't want to, I totally get it.
Oh, no.
All right, well, that's a great way to get started.
I like it.
And now I've seen David Koch's socks, so I think I've made it. Any story behind those socks there?
No. I bought them in bulk, as most blokes do, and I try and go for ties rather than showing off socks, because on Sunrise suits are also boring and sort of dark and stuff like that. So I feel like my ties, I can show my creativity. I buy them all myself from a great little business in Melbourne, a family business called Quebec, and they make all the ties themselves at a reasonable price. So support small business.
No, absolutely. Well, that's a funny story. Since we started this segment, and obviously the guests are far more important than me. Someone in Adelaide, your hometown, actually picked it up and sent me some socks. So I sent from a small business called the Odd Sock Mob, and they do some cool socks. So there you go. We got something in common.
Good on you. Supporting small business and a good South Australian business. Perfect.
There you go.
We'll get you onto fruit shops.
Great place to start. So, I mean, obviously people know you from TV, and obviously your involvement through Aussie Rules and all sorts of, you've done some amazing things. But I think I wanted to go a little bit deeper. I think our viewers will be really interested in actually your investing background, because you actually started off training as an accountant, or you studied accounting?
Yep, started training as an accountant, and I was working as a junior in a chartered accountancy group as I was finishing my studies. And the accounting degree I was doing, one of the other students was the wife of Brian Frith, who was at that stage the business editor of the Australian newspaper. And we did in accounting, you do a unit called corporate strategy. And our project for that, you got marked on a project you had to work as a team, was taking over a listed company. And so Faye Frith and I did a takeover of David Jones. And based on that, Brian said, do you want to get in the media? Do you want to become a business journo?
Wow.
So I'd done enough accounting and auditing to realise that it really wasn't for me. Knowing what I was going to do on that day next year probably didn't suit my personality. So I started as a cadet journo on the business pages of the Australian newspaper, and that's how I got into media. And on the day my eldest child, so 40 years ago this month, she was born, and we started the longest strike in media history. Went for 8 weeks. So I was a cadet, I had no money, newly married, a daughter born on the day, an 8-week strike over the introduction of computers. So
it was preparation for coronavirus.
Yeah, exactly right. So I did a couple of years on the Australian, and then a whole bunch of business magazines were started, BRW and Australian Business, Bob Gottliebson. Yeah. I've been really lucky with my mentors in Brian Frith and Gotti. Bob Gottliebson said, do you want to come to Melbourne and work on BRW, which I did. And it was about the time of Paul Keating as treasurer. He deregulated everything, deregulated the Australian dollar, financial markets, all that sort of stuff. The patron saint of investing, I call him, because he allowed Australians to invest. And I came up with an idea called Personal Investment Magazine, which was an investment magazine for ordinary Australians. And I convinced Fairfax to launch it and to back it. And it was one of the great success stories of publishing in the 80s and 90s. And I started a similar magazine in New Zealand and one in the UK for Fairfax as well. So I've always been, because I at the time thought to myself, how can I build a career as a finance journo while being young? Because to get credibility, you had to be old and bald and grey-haired like I am now. So, and no one was writing about investing for ordinary Australians. So I saw that as maybe a niche to get into and build a brand in it.
And did you start that business, or was it like a JV, or was it bought out, or how did it start?
No, it was interesting. It was owned by Fairfax, and while I was starting the English version of it was their first investment magazine as well. It was the first investment magazine here in Australia, first in New Zealand, first in the UK. I came across a publication still in the investment industry, but for professional advisors and fund managers. And so I sort of pinched that idea, started that, came back from London, started that as my own business, and Fairfax came in as my joint venture partner until they went into receivership in the crash of the late 80s, and I bought them out for $1. So,
oh, wow. So they bought you and you bought them back.
Yeah, that's how I sort of started my family business.
Yeah, amazing. And you didn't go in with news, but you're working for news before that, right? So
yeah, as a contributor for News Limited, because when I started Personal Investment Magazine, I based it not on the layout of any business magazine. I based it on Cosmopolitan and Clio, basically, two women's magazines. And we had sealed sections and we had zip outs, and no one was
more sexy.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
To make it more approachable.
Yeah.
And so whenever the magazine came out, radio stations would get me on to talk about the cover story, or the 101 ways to cut your tax, or the 10 best growth stock, whatever. And they got so much response to it. I started doing radio interviews once a week, and then they gave me a daily investment program for an hour each night on the Macquarie Radio Network. And then News Limited said, do you want to come and be a columnist for it? So for them. So, it's, my father always had a great saying, have enough confidence in yourself to give anything a go, but then have enough confidence in yourself that if it's not for you and you don't like it, move on to something else. So never let an opportunity pass, but never get tied down to do something that you don't like.
Yeah, no. So obviously you built businesses and you've got good people around you that can take them further.
Oh, yeah.
You've done that a few times.
Oh, and also been to the brink, looked over the edge of going broke, and come back for it. I remember Jerry Harvey from Harvey Norman. Even as a young journo, was always very kind to me. And I loved him. He's a grumpy old bugger, but a great business person. And he would always inquire after my business. And I remember him once saying, Kochs, you've never been in business until you've been to the brink, looked over the cliff, and come back from it. And I used to think, what a grumpy old bugger you are, until it happened to me, and you realise that it's a big learning experience. And that's what business and investing is all about.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are learning that lesson now, unfortunately, with what's going on. You need to show resilience and, really fight through it. Absolutely.
And have a clear plan and understand that you're going to lose sleep at night. There's going to be months. I love reading. And one of the great books, because all my businesses have had terrible cash flow all through my career. If they'd all work well at the same time would be great, but they're always out of sync. And I remember reading Shoe Dog, Phil Knight's biography.
That's a great book.
The founder of Nike. And in that book, the hottest shoe company in the world had cash flow problems his entire career until he cashed in and floated it, and it floated for about $2 billion. But he was the same. I read that book thinking, oh God, I'm glad it happened to him as well, and I'm not just terrible at what I do.
So, I mean, obviously you've done so much in terms of the investing space. You've been an advocate for small business. How do you make investment decisions for yourself? You know, so you've seen a lot. Like, how do you
Yeah.
strategize and do that?
Oh, look, with mixed success, I'm probably too conservative in my investing. I think that's a good thing because I'm in quite a volatile profession. You know, yes, TV's great and I love it, and you get paid pretty well, but you get fired at the drop of a hat. And I've always had this view. That's why I've always had my own business. That I never trusted it for a living. Because when I first started in it, I had kids, I had a mortgage, and it gets pretty ruthless. So I've always been quite conservative on the investing side because I've had a family business and a volatile profession. So I've tended to go reasonably blue chip, but then I keep a portion for startups. I love startups. I love the energy from founders. I love what I can learn from founders, and that's been important for me in the last 10 years.
So I know some of the investments. Obviously, read Wikipedia, so I learned a little bit, but also know from other stories that you invested in an Australian startup, Pocketbook, that ended up exiting to Zip Money. Does that how did you get involved in a company like that?
Well, Alvin and Bosco, who were the founders of Pocketbook, actually made an appointment, came and pitched to me, and if I go back to the startup side of things to give you the story about 7 or 8 years ago, I was at a free-to-air TV conference and drinks, and they were all going, "Oh God, isn't it great? We're in free-to-air TV. We're not in newspapers which are going down the gurgler and being disrupted. You know, there's nothing disrupting us." And I shook my head and thought, if you don't think you're going to be disrupted, you got another thing coming. Every industry will be disrupted. So I felt I had to travel in that community, that disruption digital community. So I invested in a fund called Pollinizer, which was one of the early managed funds that backed startup groups. I also bought a business called Startup Daily, which is I still own, which is the daily newsletter for that startup scale-up tech sort of community, to force me to learn more about founders and the next wave of doing business. And it's been fantastic. It's probably been the best investment for me. And Pollinizer taught me that it's not just about the idea, it's about the founders.
Absolutely.
How they can cope with growth, their laser-like focus, taking advice. It's all down to the individual. And Bosco and Alvin really impressed me. And amazing. As an investor, kept me updated. I've just started my first startup myself in a business and investment streaming service called Ausbiz. And when I was looking for investors for that, I went back to Bosco and Alvin. I said, "Listen, you two, I bagged you. Now I'm turning the tables." So they're an investor in Ausbiz, and Alvin's on the board of Ausbiz and brings that sort of founder digital mentality to my new startup. So it's good. I'm invested in an insurtech business called Avari, and Advisor Ratings, which is like the TripAdvisor for financial planning. It's if you like, democratizing access to good advice, which I'm a big believer in. Big believer that the best investment you can ever make is good advice. So they're sort of my portfolio. I've invested in 3 other startups and done my shirt in all of them. So, but as a group of 6, I'm slightly ahead financially, or well ahead given Pocketbook. But in terms of my personal development, streets ahead. and that's been one of the great benefits of it.
Yeah, that's what I found. I was obviously in trading and I had to deal with a computer screen, and now you're dealing with people and all sorts of backgrounds and customers, and you build resilience.
Yep, exactly right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. But you also have had one investment that would be, I think, more interesting, which was the Sydney Kings investment. You probably thought it would be like an NBA team; it would go for billions.
Well, that's probably my worst investment, but one of my most enjoyable. This is how I justified it to my wife. I said, look, yes, it's the Sydney Kings. My kids were great basketball fans. I played basketball, and we had a family team in the local comp. So with my brother and all of my nephews and sons-in-law and stuff like that. And so I said to Lib, look, I'm not a golfer. I've never played golf. And if I add up all of the years of golf memberships that I didn't pay for, it basically equals this investment into the Kings. And the family will be able to enjoy it. So, and she just looked at me, shook her head as wives usually do, and said, well, I think you're an idiot, but yeah, let's have some fun. So it was good. And it was only a relatively small amount.
No. And you got it past the investment committee, so it's okay now.
Yeah.
You're both responsible.
Yep, exactly right. Exactly.
Yeah. No, and the last thing I wanted to touch on was how you see the current situation with the world playing out. Obviously, small businesses really well, and then you're obviously involved in the media and you're seeing what's happening. How do you think it's going to play out from an economic and social viewpoint?
Oh, look, and I've been through some doozies in the past. The recession of the early 90s, the last time Australia had a recession. No Australian under the age of 47 has endured an economic recession as a responsible adult. So we've had a golden period. Even though I think we're also grumpy, it's probably the most hated period of prosperity this country's ever been through. But we're in good shape going into the, investment markets call it a black swan event. With the global financial crisis, you could sort of see it coming because just the excess and the hosing of money at people who couldn't afford it and all of that sort of thing. It just got the dot-com crash you could sort of see in the late 90s, 2000s. The Asian financial crisis, with the house of cards of a lot of Asian economies. With this, came out of nowhere. I've never seen anything like it. So it's really hard to predict how bad the next 6 or 12 months is going to be and people go, oh, what do you reckon it's going to be like in September? And I said, okay, what did you reckon it would be like just back in February?
Yeah. No,
Do
exactly.
you think we would have gone through this? So, look, I think it's going to be a tough recession, a hard recession, but it's going to be, I think, short and sharp. I'm starting, and I'll premise this by saying I am an optimistic person, okay? It's probably one of my faults.
It's done all right for you.
Yeah, maybe overly optimistic. I think we will get through this in better shape than I originally thought. Middle to end of March, when we all thought the world was going to collapse forever. It's going to be hard, no doubt about that. And there's still a lot of people being stood down and a lot of financial pain. But I think we're in pretty good shape to come out of it quicker than maybe we expected. And
I think particularly in Australia.
Yeah, particularly here in Australia. Overseas, I don't think have handled it nearly as well as us. And they could be a bit longer, which is why I think the federal government is stupid to actually, pull the tail of China and get on their bad side. Why are we leading from the front on that when they're our biggest customer? You don't want our biggest customer getting the shits with us during a deep recession. That's just crazy. Go to the UK, go to the the EU, go to America and say, let's all do this together, rather than sort of beating our chest early. But anyhow, we're a bit naive with that. So I don't think we need China to pull their students or their tourists or whatever, because tourism, where a lot of jobs are, will be really affected. But, tread cautiously and look for stocks at the moment that have been left behind. Like it's a momentum game at the moment, going through it.
No, amazing. Well, David, thank you so much. It's, obviously people can follow you and get more information at ausbiz. You're also anchoring some of the shows there as well. Yeah,
I love it. I'm anchoring at midday every day, The Call, which is viewers send in 10 stocks that they want to, and we cover stocks they want an opinion on. We cover 10 in 60 minutes with 2 experts, and it's a lot of fun. It's really good fun.
Can I throw you some American stocks in next week?
Yes, definitely.
All right. If you get Matt from Sydney, it's me.
Yeah. Hang on. You've been on, haven't you?
I've been on the show, but, I actually want to get some advice. There's so many stocks there. I don't know what to buy sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. It's a deal. It's a date next week. You're on.
Well, thank you so much, and good luck for Port. At the time of filming, you guys are top of the table, but we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. We've been top of the table for almost 10 weeks now, which is a record for the club in its 150th year. So,
well, congratulations. We'll see what happens come, I don't know, it won't be September, it won't be October. So.
No. See what happens on the weekend of June 11.
All right, David, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks very much for the invitation.
Thanks again. That was perfect.
Good on you.
All right.